I'd like to introduce Jason Drew, who I had the pleasure to meet in South Africa back in last May. It was such a great experience for me. It was personal experience. I was so inspired that you could actually do business out of things that you could really never think of. Jason is a serial entrepreneur. He's passionate environmentalist and inspirational business leader. He has started and invested in some remarkable 21st century business. Described by Leadership magazine as one of Africa's most inspiring green leaders, Jason will give you a unique insight into the future of business, the environment, and the challenges the future holds for us as business leaders. He will also share insight into some remarkable, profitable green businesses that he has started and invested in. So, Jason, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good evening. The Industrial Revolution is over, and the sustainability revolution has begun. How we manage this transition will define the outcome of the 21st century for everyone in this room, and indeed all of humanity. The problem is that the future is not what it used to be. The future has for so long been a vaguely predictable extension of the past. Things got faster, smaller, easier to communicate, easier to do things. But the problem about revolutions is that everything changes. That is the nature of revolution. I grew up in a world when the operating software for business was around extract, manufacture, throw away, around multi-generational product development, where the iPhone 4 was on the drawing board before the iPhone 1 had hit the shops. Those core operating systems, the principles of business that I grew up with, have vanished and gone. If you build a business based on those old operating environments, you will fail in your business. If you don't adapt your business, you will fail as a... Is that going to work now? Excuse this minor interruption.
It's a busy day. I don't want to...
So if you fail to adapt to the new operating software of business, you will fail in whatever you're trying to do. I describe the 5 core things as repairability, durability, upgradability, shareability, and closability of business loops. Those are the 5 tenets of the new sustainability revolution. Let me give you some examples about what I mean about some of these things. Talk about sharing. I know most of us are very used to sharing stuff. We share hotel rooms, we share planes, well, most of us do anyway. And if you had said just 10 years ago that 100 million of the richest people on the planet will be sharing bicycles, you'd have thought I was mad. Yet you cannot go to a major city in Europe or Americas where there isn't a bike sharing scheme. If I'd said at the same time just 10 years ago, every single African, just about, will have a mobile phone, even though many of them don't have enough food to eat, you'd say, no, it's never going to happen in my lifetime. Mobile phones are for the few and the elite. And if I said that 60% of those were internet-abled, internet-abled phones didn't even exist 10 years ago. So you can see the pace of change and the pace of things that is going to be very different around us. If you think about the 5 or 6 businesses that didn't exist 10 years ago, from Skype to Instagram to Airbnb, just take your pick, that is how quickly and how fast the world is changing. But it's much more profound than new ideas into an old world. It really is about new ideas into a new world. If you take a washing machine made by Dyson, for example, a Dyson washing machine has a life expectancy of 4.6 years. Under the world of extract, manufacture, throw away, that's what you wanted to do. Take some minerals out the ground, manufacture something, and get people to throw it away so they'll buy another one. That is finished. The new Dyson machine will have a design life of 30 years. Now, how are you going to make money out of building something that lasts for 30 years? The answer is quite simple. If you take a washing machine, there's only 4 things ever go wrong with a washing machine. There's the belt that connects the motor to the drum. There is the motor itself. There is the seal around the door, and there's a slidey bit you put the powder into. The new Dyson machine, when your belt breaks, you go to the side of it, you turn a handle, you pull it out, you put your email address on it, and you put it in the letterbox. The next day, you get an invoice which you pay, and the following day, you get the self-repairing item back delivered in the post to you. Now, you can begin to understand how you can design a carcass that has 30 years of life in it. The same applies to the steel around. It's easily removable, it's easily changeable, and in fact, it's also upgradable. So if you want to change the electronics to be programmed to fit in with your Bluetooth from your phone, you can do that too. So repairability and upgradability is so fundamentally different. So Dyson Corporation is now looking at making money over a 30-year life cycle. The great thing they don't have to do is every 5 years compete with you as a customer, or compete with its competitors to get you as a customer, because you're locked in, because you're sold something that is durable, it is upgradable, it is repairable. It applies to every aspect of business. Take Marks and Spencer's in the UK. Marks and Spencer's has never made a cotton shirt. Cotton is as recyclable as paper, tin, plastic or glass. But all cotton shirts, the panels, the 4 or 5 panels they're made from, are sewn together using nylon because it's stronger than cotton. The buttons on the front are compressed nylon. The new Marks and Spencer shirts are entirely cotton. The buttons are simply made of compressed cotton. Why is this so important? Because in a world where your washing machine lasts for 30 years, what is the purpose of a retailer? Now, in the old days, you'd go into Marks and Spencer's and buy a suit or buy a shirt. Now you go online, expect Marks and Spencer's to deliver it to you at their cost when you want it to be, and for it to be cheaper than it was in the shop in the first place. One of the things that Marks and Spencer has trialled and is now succeeding enormously in is a program called swapping, where you bring your old 100% cotton clothes into Marks and Spencer's, or they are now new old cotton clothes. You put them in a bin and you get 20% off your product, of your whatever you're going to buy. This is not some gimmick about greenwashing. They're actually buying the cotton off you that they're going to make another shirt out of, rather than going to a farmer in Pakistan or in Texas to buy that raw cotton. They're buying it back from you, the consumer. So they're closing a loop in that process. That is as fundamentally different to any retailer's concept as you can imagine. Extract, manufacture, throw away is gone. If you look at Patagonia, Patagonia makes very upmarket cold weather wear for skiing and for outdoor adventuring. Not they have much call for it here. But they've redefined their purpose as a retailer. So they do the swapping type stuff. They make stuff out of nylon that's only one type of nylon, not mixed with polyesters or any other types of plastics. So the clothes are entirely recyclable. But they've gone one step further and said, we are making products that are durable, products that will last. And we will make money out of them in a different way. So when you're bored of your Patagonia jumper that you've bought, or you've moved from Scotland to Doha, you send your Patagonia jumper to Patagonia. They check it, they clean it, they check it out, and they put it on the Patagonia eBay store. They have sold their first jacket 3 times. So they've made their profit by owning that good and putting it into the marketplace, and at 3 times during the lifetime of that jacket, they have made a profit as Patagonia. It's so different to the buy one product off me, make sure it doesn't last very long, and is thrown away the next day. So that's just from the retail world, how fundamentally different it is. So whether you're in white goods manufacturing, or you're in retailing, or take consumer electronics, the first really fully upgradable TV screens will be on our market within the next year or so from Samsung. So the screens, you can make a screen to last for 100,000 hours. Nobody ever makes a screen for 100,000 hours because they were getting bigger and cheaper. But most people live in houses where you can't get a bigger screen onto the wall because you haven't got enough room. At the same time, the only things that really change are the insides, the technology. So you can upgrade the software of those TVs online already, the smart TVs. Now you'll be able to upgrade the hardware too. You simply take a box off the back, plug in the new one with the latest whatever's been invented. But the screen technology is not going to change that much. We're still going to have screens. They're not going to be any bigger than most people's living room walls are going to be. And so Samsung is going to make tellies that last for 15 or 20 years, not ones that last for 4 or 5, are designed to be outdated. These are designed to be upgraded. They're designed to last. And at the end of their lives, when that does come, they're designed to be recycled. So every single industry I've touched in every single way is changing fundamentally and remarkably. There is no such thing as the old operating software. It's all moved into a new world. And that is the world into which we need to design and build our businesses. When I look at businesses coming up that are businesses of what I call the sustainability revolution, new businesses, more businesses and more opportunity will be thrown up in the next 15 years than the last. More billion-dollar industries that you have never thought of will be born. They will become global businesses in years, not in decades that took in the past. And I think that the next great fortunes, and every era has had its age of fortune makers. People made huge amounts of money out of cotton, then out of steam, out of railroads, out of the internet bubble. The next great revolutions in terms of fortunes to be made, the next Bill Gates, the next Mark Zuckerberg, will come out of the sustainability revolution, and they'll come out in the next 4 or 5 years, and they'll have done businesses that you never thought were possible until you really understood why they were so obvious. And so much of it is really about going back to the very basics. So businesses in the extract, manufacture, throwaway world defined themselves and put themselves first. In the sustainability revolution, businesses are defining themselves simply as part of the environment. When Coca-Cola first started spending $50 million a year on planting trees, everyone in the States was up in arms, the shareholders at meetings, every single AGM saying, why Coca-Cola are you planting trees? And every year it was the same answer. Guys, we are not in the business of making Coca-Cola. What our business is taking fresh water, clean water, and adding things to it and putting it in tins. Without clean water, there is no Coca-Cola. So what is fundamental to Coca-Cola's business? The access to clean water. What provides that clean water? Riverways, systems, trees, and forests. So that is why Coca-Cola is blowing $50 million a year on planting trees. Not because it's a tree-hugging corporation, because it understands fundamentally that that is part of its future. And every business in every way is doing this. And those businesses that have an eye on the future, that have been around for 30 or 40 years, like General Electric, the only company that was in the top 100 companies in the States in 1900 and in 2000. Why? Because it has a long-term vision. 25 to 30% of GE's revenues today come from GE's sustainability and environmental practices. Not from making airplane engines, but from doing things differently. So the world is shifting this way so quickly and so fast that it's quite exciting. So, we're into an interesting world where we're going to make things, we're going to carry on making profits. The old world of environmentalism versus capitalism has gone. I call myself an environmental capitalist. Why? Because that's what I am. I am both. I go into businesses not to get an income, but to make capital. And I'm deeply passionate about the environment. Now, in the old world, you had to be schizophrenic to be an environmentalist and a capitalist. In the new world, you have to be both. If you're not an environmentalist, your business will fail if you don't understand the environment. If you're an environmentalist with a cause and you don't understand the markets and don't understand how business generates capital, your cause will fail as well. So the new key word for me is environmental capitalism. And that's what I describe myself as, working on the 5 new pillars that I see and discarding the old pillars. And that's all exciting. There's a lot of things to be done and an endless stream of opportunities. But the one thing that challenges me most, and the question I ask myself very often, is how on earth are we going to feed 9 billion people? So every single day, 375,000 of us are born, 170,000 of us die. That means that this evening, 205,000 more people will sit down for supper than had breakfast this morning. That's the equivalent of adding New York to the planet every single month. What on earth are we going to feed these people? And so I became very, very interested in the whole food cycle and applying what I call my sustainability revolution and environmental capitalism to that particular problem. Because we can pick lots of different problems, but that's the area that interested me most. So I went around the world and studied all of our ecosystems. All our food comes from 3 places: our water, our land, and our seas. Now, each of those ecosystems is under immense stress. You only have to look and you will be well aware of the water strains we face around the world, particularly in this part of the world. But right across the world, our water resources are really, really under pressure. And it's not surprising because water is the single biggest traded commodity on the planet. You think you're buying a kilo of steak from America when you buy a nice kilo of prime steak. You're not. What you're buying is 25,000 litres of water, because that's how much water it takes, pumped from the Olagala aquifer under America's Midwest, to grow the grain, to feed the cow that makes the steak that sells in your supermarket here. Because guess what? If it rained every single day of the week here, like it does in parts of America, you'd grow your own cattle in much bigger numbers. So you're buying condensed water. When the Chinese build the Three Gorges Dam, they think it's for hydropower. It's not for hydropower. They're building 2 coal-fired power stations a week. Why do they need a power station? They don't. It just happens to be a useful thing to add on to a water reserve, so that when you get your iPad, which takes 35,000 litres of water to make, delivered from China, they've got the water to make your iPhone. Because every time you extrude the metal, press the glass, run it over, you need water to make those things work. So the Three Gorges Dam is as much about feeding industry as it is about generating power. In fact, it's more about feeding industry. So when I say that, buying your phone from China, actually what you're doing is importing 35,000 litres of compressed water. And that is why water is the single largest traded commodity on the planet. If you look at our land is the next thing that we take for granted. Yet, for every human on this planet, 3 cubic metres of the one most precious thing we have, our soil, is washed out to sea every year. Because we cut down the forest, the erosion and all those sort of things. I mean, every day in the papers you see mudslides and rivers that are brown, the brown rivers, not because they're dirty, because they're full of topsoil. We don't really live on Earth. We live on a molten ball of rock surrounded by a very thin crust of rock. And on top of that very thin crust of rock is an even thinner layer of something called soil, for which we all depend for our very lives. Because without soil, there is nothing left. You can't grow plants in thin air. So our water and our land and our seas for me were the most desperately passionate thing that I found around the world. So I started looking at our early accounts of how we used to go and fish cod in Europe. And the sailors would sail across to the Americas, and they would complain that the passage of their ships was impeded by the shoals of fish in the sea, because the wind power was not strong enough to push them through the shoals of fish. They fished with baskets, and they took stones from the ballast in the ship to drop through the fish to pull them up, because there were so many fish they couldn't get them. Then, and that was what we now know as the Grand Banks of Canada. The Grand Banks of Canada closed to fishing 12 years ago, simply because there were no fish left. We destroyed them, we'd eaten them all. And if you look at the Grand Banks, you look at the Sea of Galilee, you look at all our seas around the world, they are emptying of fish at an extraordinary rate. You only have to be a studier of the markets. For 3 years running, a fish has made it onto the front page of almost every newspaper in the world. And that's the opening of the Tokyo's fish market. A single bluefin tuna in 2012 sold for $375,000. And the world was amazed that somebody paid $370,000 for a fish. The following year, a single fish sold for $760,000. Just last year in February at the opening of the market, a single bluefish tuna sold for $1.8 million. That's why they made the front page of the newspaper. Did anyone ask themselves why? Supply and demand. You can buy a rhino horn for $400,000, yet you pay $1.6 million for a bluefin tuna. How many more or less bluefin tuna do you think there are in the world than rhinos? So the markets are telling us very clearly what's happening to our fish stocks. And the problem with our fish stocks is that 1/3 of all the fish we take out of our seas is ground up and made into something called fish meal. And that fish meal is then used to farm chickens and to farm fish. So our shrimp farms and our salmon farm take somewhere between 1.5 and 8 kilos of sea caught fish, grind it up to make a kilo of fish in a fish farm. Why do we bother to do that? Because the supermarket chains can get a fish this big on a Thursday afternoon without question, without fail. And it's easier than going fishing. So our fish stocks are being decimated around the world. All animals that are monogastric, have one stomach, need animal protein as part of their diet to achieve their target weight in a period of time. So that is why we feed fish meal to chickens in our chicken farms. It's why we feed in our cat foods and our dog foods is mostly fish meal. That's where the protein is. Yes, you have some balance with carbohydrates and starches and soya, but that's where it comes from. So our seas are being destroyed at an extraordinary rate. I happened to be in Saudi at a cow farm, milking cow farm, with 40,000 cows in air-conditioned sheds. And I really thought this was not going to last. In fact, it didn't. It's now closed down. But I also asked them where they got their chickens from. And they said, well, we get 1 million chickens a month from South Africa. And most of them from a town 40 kilometres from where my farm happened to be. So I went to go and visit these chickens, and I ended up at the back of the slaughterhouse. And at the back of the slaughterhouse, 1 million chickens makes 250,000 litres of blood. That's 10 petrol tankers of blood that were being poured into the ground every single week. And surrounding this lake of blood were millions and millions of flies, all buzzing in F minor. I know a lot about flies these days. And it suddenly dawned on me that when I was a child back at my grandparents' house in the north of England, there was only 2 ways to catch a fish out of a river. One was to tie a fly onto the end of the line and cast it over the water. The other was to go and find an animal droppings in a field, break them open, find the little wriggly larvae, put those on a hook and drop them in the water. And I suddenly thought that is what fish should eat. So we then set about creating what is now, by head count, the world's largest farm on the planet. We have 8.5 billion flies in immense buildings at the end of Cape Town's runway. And we take 100 tons a day of organic waste, uneaten food, leftover food from supermarkets into our factory. And we take the eggs of the flies, we put the eggs onto that waste, we grow them little wriggly larvae, and out of 100 tons of that, we make 24 tons a day of fish meal equivalent. It's actually larvae meal. It's what fish have always eaten since fish were invented. It's what chickens have always eaten. When a chicken scratches in a field, it's looking for a worm, it's looking for an ant, it's looking for a larvae, the hatched egg of a fly, because that's what they've always eaten. If chickens were meant to eat fish, they'd be called seagulls. So we started the business that we now call the industry of nutrient recycling. 10 years from now, you will think it as normal to recycle your waste nutrients as you think it normal to recycle your paper, your plastic, your tin and your glass today. The beautiful thing that we're doing is we're making a commodity, and the price of that commodity, along with the decline in our stocks, has gone one way. The price of fish meal now is $2,400 a tonne, to 2,380 this morning, up from 1,200. And we're making a commodity at a quarter of that price, less than a quarter. So each factory is immensely profitable, but it does 2 or 3 things. It prevents waste going to landfill, and it brings back and closes a loop in nature that is very, very important. Humans cannot live without flies. When humans move to different parts of the world, we can only move to places in the world where there are flies. Flies in nature have a remarkable job. They clean up waste. That's what they do. If an animal dies in the desert, the first thing that happens is flies will lay eggs on it. They will consume that animal in different stages, eat up all the parts. A passing bird might come and peck a larvae off them, not meat eaters, but just insect eaters. And that is what they do. They, at the same time, disinfect it. Now, why they disinfect it is because when you have a cell breaking down in nature, there's only 2 things want it. One is bacteria, and the other is larvae. So larvae have the world's most up-to-date antibiotics. They emit antibiotics in order to keep the bacteria away from the protein they want to eat. Now, Genghis Khan knew this 1,200 years ago, which is why Genghis Khan would never go into battle without flies. He would go in as he was conquering down through Mongolia, right through much of the world, he would take a covered wagon. In the back of that wagon, he would have flies, and they would lay eggs on the rotting material there. He would take those eggs off and put them on the wounds of his soldiers. Those larvae would hatch on the wound of his soldiers. They would disinfect the wound. They would eat the broken cells. They can't eat whole cells. You can hold a handful, and they can't do it. So they are a most remarkable thing that is essential to nature. And their job in nature is to do exactly that. So we've harvested that process. So in its simplest form, our factory looks like a big cage. We teach the flies to lay eggs in one place. We take the eggs out of the cages. We take the waste from Cape Town. We put the 2 together in a process. We grow the larvae, and we only have 3 outputs. The larvae, which is a 55% protein-rich, equivalent to fish meal. we have the oils that we extract from the larvae when we squeeze them, which is very similar to fish oils, and omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid rich. And our third product is compost. And so out of 100 tons a day of waste, we make 24 tons of larvae, 2 tons we put back into our cages to keep the breeding cycle going. We make 22 tons of what we call maggot meal. We dry that down to 7.5 tons with 3.5 tons of oil and 14 or 15 tons of compost. And the difference between that and the amount of weight we take in is simply water that's evaporated during the process, because as you know, lettuce is 70% water. So we just clean up the organic structures around the world. We have just licensed last week our first 6 factories around the world. So we're building one now in North America, South America, building our first one in Hong Kong, Australia, and we're building factories as fast as we can. We think there's a market for 2,500 factories of the same size as the one we built in Cape Town. And we expect to get a large part of that market because we are so far ahead in the science. Nobody's ever tried to make flies live, only people have ever tried to kill them. The first evidence of that is on the hieroglyphs in Egypt, where if you go and you see and watch the hieroglyphs, the pharaohs would have somebody holding an umbrella to keep the sun off and somebody swatting the flies. So I know that for at least 3,000 years we've been swatting flies. So flies are an extraordinary thing and part of our environment. And we have made what I think is a very interesting business out of using the fly to recycle and close that loop in nature. Now, one of the things that we have is we have huge cages of flies, and flies are expensive. Well, the cages are expensive. The factories cost many millions of dollars. And so I thought, I know that boys don't lay eggs. I know that the girls lay the eggs. So I went to see the people who'd written the genome of the fly. The fly was the second animal after the human to have its genome mapped. Why? Because everywhere there's a human, there's a fly. Well, apart from Antarctica, where there shouldn't be humans anyway. But there are flies everywhere there are humans. And so I went to meet these guys, and they talked about it for a long time. And I said, no, it really isn't. It's not that you need. You don't need genetics. What you need is pheromones, so attractants and smells. I said, what, a bit like sort of Chanel No. 5 maybe? He said, yes, exactly that. So you put that outside the cage, and the boys get attracted to that, and then you can leave just the females in the cages and put 10% of the boys back in, and there you've got your problem solved with the right ratio of females to males like you would have in any farming operation. And they said, yeah, but you must listen to just one more business idea we've had. We've just finished the genome of the mosquito as well. And I said, guys, look, I'm just a simple businessman. I don't know anything about mosquitoes or about genomes or anything. They said, no, but we think we've got a remarkable business idea. And it turned out they had one of the best ideas I'd ever come across in my life. And so here's the story. They had written the genome of Aedes aegypti, which is the mosquito that carries dengue fever around the world. In Brazil, Brunei, Singapore, Malaysia, lots of parts of the Middle East too, there are the mosquitoes that carry dengue fever. But they're a particular problem in Singapore and in Brazil. So what they had done is they'd written the genome of the mosquito, found out the section of the genome that makes the mosquito fertile, and inverted it, so that they could then breed sterile male mosquitoes. Now, I said, well, sure, this is dangerous, it can get out of control. And he looked at me like I was mad, the scientist, and said, no. I said, surely, they can be sterile and then you wipe out all mosquitoes and mosquitoes must have a purpose in the environment. He said, no, you don't understand. Sterility is the only thing on the planet you cannot inherit, because if your parents were sterile, you would never have been born. So we did our first trials in the Cayman Islands, and we released tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these sterile male mosquitoes. And they had the desired effect of reducing the mosquito population by 90-95%. But it had some remarkably unintended consequences. So the first thing that happened is the swallows left the island. Then the fish started dying in the lakes. And then the rat population exploded. And that was when we understood what the purpose of the mosquito is in nature. So the mosquito passes disease between rats in the same way as it passes disease between humans and controls the rat population. The mosquitoes lay their eggs in water. And the fish, predominant in this part of the world, would be tilapia, Nile tilapia, and those sort of things. They eat the mosquito eggs in the water. That's where they get their protein from. Everyone always thought that they were vegetarian fish, but they're not. And then as the mosquito emerges from the water, there's little things called boatmen, and they just sit on the top of the water, and they scuttle across the water, and they eat the mosquitoes as they come out of the water. And that's what the swallows eat. I always thought when I was a child watching swallows diving over the water that they were getting a drink. But of course, if you stick your beak into the water at 50 kilometers an hour, you're going to end up in a ball of feathers. So what they're doing is just picking those insects off the water. So then we licensed some clever technology from the Russians, which is a genetic stain marker, and we were able to give our mosquitoes a stain so we could identify them. We then discovered that mosquitoes only ever move 100 meters in their lifetime. Most mosquitoes are born and lay their eggs in the puddles from which they emerged. Now, the reason that our control of mosquitoes is so interesting is because they're the single biggest killer on the planet. Whether you take dengue fever or malaria or whatever you want, it is one of the biggest killers on the planet. But our approach to getting rid of mosquitoes is like letting off a nuclear bomb. So what we do is we drive through the streets of Brazil. We have fogging trucks that emit huge amounts of clouds of pesticide that kill everything. They kill the birds, the butterflies, the bees, the whole food chain, when all we want to do is get rid of that mosquito. So when we realized that they only moved 100 meters in their life cycle, if you wanted to protect this village, for example, you draw a circle around it 100 meters. Every 100 meters on that circle, you release clouds of sterile male mosquitoes. They meet with the wild female mosquitoes. The wild female mosquito lays her eggs. Those eggs never hatch. 6 weeks later, you've got rid of your mosquito problem for 6 weeks. If you do nothing, 6 weeks later, they will have moved in from the wild again. So it makes it a fantastic business because every 6 weeks you have a choice to go and spray more pesticide or to use our solution and just take out the one pest that is causing you the problem. So we have been in trials with Brazil now for 3 or 4 years, and last year we were awarded 5% of their spend on mosquito control, which is $1 billion a year. So out of nothing, we went from a business with the same cost line and £1 million of revenues to same cost line and $50 million of revenues. We will get 50 and 80% of Brazil's spend over the next 5 or 6 years. So we've gone on from there, the guys who've done the genetic work, and we've done things like the Spanish fruit fly, the diamondback moth that eats cabbages. We're working with a program in Saudi to look at the palm weevil that eats, the red palm weevil that eats the palm trees and the dates. Well, it kills the palm trees, in fact. And so instead of doing blanket pesticides, we can get rid of individual pests in particular fields. If you go through our cotton fields in the States, we have one is a normal standard field in which there's nothing. Not a bird flies over it because there's nothing for the bird to eat. There's no flies, there's no ants, there's no butterflies, nothing. And you go through our field next door and there's absolutely everything there except the cotton boll weevil, which is the one thing that eats the cotton buds. So we've just taken that out of that field, or that 20,000 acre field as it happens. The farmers are happier, the environment's happier, nature's happier, and we haven't left any pesticides on the ground or residue chemicals. The only people who are unhappy, the people who are always trying to buy us, are the pesticide manufacturers. And I keep on saying no. And they say, well, why? I say, guys, you don't understand. My mission in life is to put you out of business, and I will do. So with agri-protein and the fly business, I really want to put out of business the fish meal fishermen. It's a currently $24 billion a year industry. It'll be a $30 billion a year industry by the time we welcome another 2 billion people onto our planet. And just by taking waste, we can get rid of that waste, and we can sustainably feed our animals with the things they should always have been eaten. With Oxitec, I hope to get rid of the pesticide industry over the course of 10 to 15 years, and I think we will do. We will successfully uninvent their future for them. The last and sort of one of my favourite businesses probably is our toilet business in Kenya that we run. In the slums of Kenya, we sell toilets to female entrepreneurs. They're sort of 2 meters square by 1 meter square. They have concrete sides and a nice toilet inside them. And the female entrepreneurs buy the toilets and charge other users, slum dwellers, 5 Kenyan shillings, 3 US cents to use them. That's about 1.5% of their daily income. This is in townships and slums where there's no service provision, there's not much of anything, not even much hope, to be honest. And yet we've managed to create a remarkable business in there. So these toilet operators on average now earn $8 a day. And if you earn $8 a day, that's 4 times the slum average income. You're a capitalist, an environmental capitalist at that. And so for $100 a year, we take away the toilet waste, which is separated into its 2 parts. We make compost with one, and with the urine, which is 15% nitrogen by its definition, that's what it is. We let that settle for 2.5 to 3 weeks. We balance it up with some phosphates and some potassium, and we end up with 5-3-1 liquid fertilizer. 5-3-1 potassium, phosphates, and nitrogen. And we compete head-on with the imported 5-3-1 granulated fertilizer from Europe that Kenya depends on. They put those granules around their coffee plants and water it in with water they haven't got. And instead, they take our 1,500 litre tanks and put that into the drip irrigation systems. And it's exactly what we've been doing for 100,000 years since we first lived in villages, recycling and closing those loops in nature. And so we have now, we're pushing 900 individual entrepreneurs running toilets, all of whom are making substantial money and able to provide things for their families that they never would have done. It's providing service in the slums. We cover our operating costs by the composting of the fecal matter, and we make a fortune from the urine. We sold 100,000 litres at $2.64 a litre last month. That's our pure profit line, out of leading a sustainable system in the toilet slums of Africa. So everywhere you go, just because there's people earning $1 a day, doesn't mean if you can't get 5 cents off 1 billion of them, you still can make yourself a hell of a business. And that's all we're doing. One of our first female entrepreneurs came back to us and said, guys, I think you haven't really understood the operating environment here in the slums. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, so many of our potential customers, okay, we agree with the average $2 a day income, but that's an average. So some people are on $4 and some people are on nothing. What we want to have is a smarter toilet experience. And so she convinced us to start a brand called Posh Life. And this is 8 US cents to use the toilet. We went to all the hotels in Nairobi, and all the unused soap from the hotels we got given to us for free. We heat it up, compress it into blocks, and so when you go to one of the Posh Life toilets, you get some soap, a 20-litre container of water, and a black container on top of the toilet roof. You get some hot water, and you get a Posh Life experience. And it's very funny because I was asking her how things were going. She said, some of these people, they're really skellums, they're sort of, they're cheats. So they stand in the queue for the Posh Life toilet, knowing that they can never afford to go there, just to be seen in that queue, and then go and use the Fresh Life toilet down the road when they haven't got serviced. And she said, we're no different to anyone else on the planet. We all want to have Nike trainers, we all want diesel jeans, we just haven't got them yet. And so that whole servicing of the bottom of the pyramid area is something that can be extremely profitable and extremely sensible. The only thing that's never worked in those environments is not-for-profit organisations, because they sooner or later run out of money, run out of managers, run out of time, and they just disappear. When you've got a for-profit organisation where everybody is making a normal business profit along the way, it works forever and a day. And that's what sustainable living is about. It's about fitting into this new world and finding things for everybody to do. One of the great challenges, I think, and the new CSI, the corporate social initiatives of the next 10 years will focus around how companies create jobs, not how companies slash jobs. Because if Microsoft, Apple, same thing, with more than $150, $180 billion at the bank, if it doesn't spend that money to create jobs, who's going to have any income or any money to buy the next Apple iPhone? So we face a lot of challenges in all of those areas. But within the food sector, if we can just get through some of our challenges, I'm working on some more and other interesting businesses which I shall have to save for another day. But my passion's about trying to get the 9 billion people fed without the social collapse that will happen if food prices rocket as they did in 2008 and may well do again in the next few years. So that is why I've put my version and my efforts of the efforts into interpreting the sustainability revolution in the food sector predominantly. We, I think, will change the world's perception over the next few years with agri-protein. With our Kenyan toilet business, the Gates Foundation just gave us $1 million, as did the South African government, to build the first really efficient nitrogen recovery system from public toilet systems. And yeah, it might be a bit squeamish, but I don't mind. The Gates boys liked it enough to give us $1 million. They gave us a few $100,000 to start agri-protein with. And that again will turn into a material business of the future. Instead of putting our sewerage into the one place it shouldn't go, into our seas, we should recycle it and use it as we have done for 100,000 years beforehand. So all of these businesses play into what I call the sustainability revolution. We face a very, very tough next 10 to 15 years in front of us. We need leadership and we need courage like we've never needed it before, and we need it now. And we all need together to get busy repairing the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jason. I'm right here. I paid close attention to the part of agri-protein technologies. So you have the power to release certain kinds of insects and flies that will do something to the environment. But did I get it right?
They're all housed in a biosecure facility.
Exactly. And then for a particular purpose, you would release them to do that purpose, and then...
No, so there's two different things. Agri-protein is just about making protein out of waste. So we use the flies, the eggs grow, they grow into larvae, little wriggly things, and we harvest those and we kill them, we make bags of protein to replace fish meal in the use of feeding chickens. Then with the mosquito business, which is called Oxitec, we have now 6 different species that we use and release. So we breed them in-house. We can breed them even though they're sterile by inverting that part of their genome temporarily. Then we release them in and around specific fields or villages or houses to take out one particular pest problem.
And that's why they're sterile. They're sterile so it doesn't overpopulate and then have a negative effect on the environment,
exactly.
Correct?
For every male we release, it only takes out of action one female, because they meet insects. Most insects only make once in their life. They lay their eggs and it doesn't hatch. So we put thousands and thousands more males into the environment around a village than would normally be the case, and then they mate with all the females, and then the females never lay they lay the eggs, but the eggs never hatch. So that's how we take out the one mosquito in and around a particular village, or the one particular pest out of a cotton field in a field in Texas. So it's very precise. It's rifle sniping shooting, just taking out one insect from a field, leaving them around, but one's in the field instead of using pesticide.
Yeah. I have one question. Did you hear about BioWish?
About?
BioWish technology.
No.
It's a certain of germs that they produce it. It's 100% is organics. Even if you are in a slaughtering house and you are cutting the neck, there is the blood. You just put it in it. It will eat the blood.
Yeah,
everything.
the biodigesters. Yes.
Biodigesters.
Yes,
So
we have looked at some of those, but again, so what you're doing there is using the organic waste to produce energy. But energy is not our problem. Food's our problem. The only way we use that waste and make it into feed for animals, a natural feed for animals. So people can be hungry, but if you ask most people, they'd rather be cold than be hungry. So we've got to feed people.
Can this business model be applied on centralized facility for sewage system?
Yes, it can. And again, I don't think that they will win in the long run, because what we need with 9 billion people is we don't need energy. We've got lots of solutions for energy: wind, solar. We've got enough hydrocarbons to do what we want to. What we have to do is make food and make it more sustainable and cheaper.
But if you suppose there is a farm, there is, 100,000 of chickens, maybe cows or sheep, goats, and we can produce all the food from the same site. We can close the slope.
You can close the circle, yes. We haven't, so we would take the waste from a chicken factory and use it in a pet food factory, or we'd use chicken waste and discarded chicken organics and use them to make fish food.
But is there a minimum scale or a minimum feasibility for it?
No, because nature does it one insect at a time. We just industrialize that process. So our factories our first one's quite large scale, but our next ones will be mega scale. We're going to go and do Brazil, Hong Kong. Hong Kong's digging holes in the ground to get rid of its organic waste. It's crazy. We're going to take the whole of Hong Kong's rubbish in the next 3 years.
I might talk to you later on after we finish.
With pleasure.
Yeah, Mr. Jason, thank you very much for the very useful information. My question is that I am from Pakistan, and we are a big country. And as you told us about the environment, we have a lot of waste. It is not managed properly. We have the wastage from the garbage, which is just means it is not the cleanliness. The environment is not very much clean. We have the waste from the wasted fruits and vegetables from the agriculture. We have the waste is from the farmhouses, from the animal farmhouse, stuff like that. So our environment is like that, and being means our government, our country is not having such capability or means the resources to manage these wastes. So my question is that how do you see it means as an opportunity in my country, how it can be from entrepreneurial point of view, means how it can be an opportunity, and from if means we want to start from some small level, small scale means not having much investment or capital, how we can proceed and what can be how we can recycle and what can be the productivity out of this means waste and opportunity.
Well, I know Pakistan very well. Apart from other things, I happen to be the Honorary Consul General for Pakistan in South Africa. So I know and love your country very well. I think there's a great opportunity there because you have chicken farms, you have a big population, you have lots of waste. It's exactly the same as everywhere else we go in the world. It's a great opportunity. Will there be one in your country within the next 10 years? There'll probably be 5 of them. It's just a question of who gets them and who builds them. So we do license our technology around the world. We're looking at partnerships in lots of different parts of the world. And funding's not the issue. Funding's never the issue for a great idea that works. It's about teams and management and getting on with it and making it happen.
Hi, Jason. My question is, within this region, we live in a very arid, harsh environment. How do you see agricultural sustainability happening in the future, or opportunities for the private sector to get involved in the agribusiness within the GCC?
I think within the GCC and the amount of visitors and tourists you have this area, you generate a huge amount of waste. The first thing we'd do would be to recycle that waste and provide a sustainable source of animal protein for the fish farms in Saudi on the west coast, the shrimp farms in Saudi on the west coast. You've got to start somewhere. So take the waste, build a fish farm rather than transporting the fish. It would be a fabulous business to have here. You've got the right temperature for growing tilapia all year round. All you need is the food source. You've got piles of it. If you don't bother to go and put it in landfill and just reuse it like we should do. So, this region's a natural. It's great. It addresses food security. Byproduct is useful soil and oils. So, it's things that you need. We all need.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I would like to say that I'm a bit not feeling good with the term capitalist, environmentalist. I mean, it looks like it's a capitalist just found a new way to win money. And it's like he's trying to steal the business for environmentalists. When we listen capitalist, environmentalist, that means that environmentalists can't make business. So this is how I feel. I don't know why you call yourself capitalist, environmentalist, but this is how I feel.
So all of my businesses leave the world a better place. So there's no question that the better that business does, AgriProtein or Oxitec, the world would be a better place. If we got rid of fish meal tomorrow, we got rid of pesticides tomorrow, the world would be a better place. Now, would I do that if I wasn't going to get paid? No. How could I possibly generate the capital to go and build 1,000 factories unless it made money? I can't. So therefore, just being an environmentalist doesn't work. And capitalists only got bad connotations because during the Industrial Revolution, capitalism became a dirty word. But you know, the truth is, I go into businesses to make capital, not to make an income for myself. So you might not like it, but it's the truth. And it's just who I am. And that's what we need. We need to be much more honest and much more clear. You know, there are almost no examples of anybody moving to communist environments of their own choice. Yet there are 130 communist parties in the world. Capitalism might have done a lot of damage, but there's not one capitalist political party anywhere in the world that has got the guts to call itself a capitalist party. So let's just get a bit honest, a bit more real, and start telling some truth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.